Noah Jones was 55 years old, and the house on Holly Ridge Lane was now his alone. It was a good house, one that had held a family for 30 years. It had absorbed the sounds of children growing up and the rhythms of a long marriage. Now, in the deep quiet of a December afternoon, it only echoed. The divorce had been final for 2 months, a process as quiet and tidy as the closing of a book. His son Michael was in another state for a new job. His daughter Lauren was spending the holiday season with her mother in another city. The decisions were all reasonable, all understandable, and together they formed a perfect wall of solitude. It was Christmas Eve. Noah stood in his living room, a single box of decorations at his feet. He had told himself he would not bother this year. Yet here he was, the urge for some small ceremony proving stronger than his resignation. He assembled the small artificial tree, its branches a little bent from years in the attic. He hung a handful of old ornaments, each one a memory. A clumsy clay reindeer Michael made in first grade. A glittering glass ball from his honeymoon. He plugged in a single string of lights. The multicolored glow did not fill the room so much as it highlighted how empty it was. He put on a record, the familiar voice of a singer from his own childhood filling the air with songs of sleigh rides and cheer. The music did not defeat the silence. Instead, the silence seemed to swallow the songs whole, leaving only the faint hiss of the record player. Noah sat in his worn armchair, the one that had always been his, and looked at the tree. The feeling that came was not a sharp sadness. It was something wider and deeper. It was a hollow space inside his ribcage, a vast and quiet loneliness that felt as physical as the cold creeping in from the windows. It was the absence of shared breath, of another person's warmth in the next room, of the expected, comforting clutter of togetherness. He made a simple dinner and ate it at the kitchen table, the click of his fork the only sound. He washed a single plate and the single glass. The routine of it, once part of a bustling kitchen symphony, now felt like a ritual performed in a museum. Later, as he prepared for bed, he passed the closed doors of his children's old rooms. He did not open them. The memories behind them were too bright, too loud for the fragile quiet of the house tonight. Under the blankets, the weight of the day settled upon him. The loneliness was not just in the house. It was in him. It had seeped into his bones, a chill that no heater could touch. He felt it as a tangible thing, a cold, dense stone where his heart should be. He thought of Christmases past, a blur of wrapping paper and laughter and crowded beds on Christmas morning. He thought of the future, a straight, quiet road he could not quite see the end of. The present was just this, the sigh of the furnace, the distant groan of a tree branch in the wind, the immense, waiting silence of the snow falling outside, covering the world in a soft, white hush. Noah closed his eyes, alone with the great, echoing emptiness, and waited for a morning he did not know how to face. Noah woke in the deep blue darkness that comes just before dawn. For a moment, he was confused by the unfamiliar stillness. Then he remembered. It was Christmas morning, and he was alone. That heavy, cold loneliness from the night before was still there in his chest. But as he lay in bed, it began to change. It was no longer just a feeling. It became a physical sensation, a deep humming vibration that started in his jaw and traveled down his spine. It was a strange and unsettling tingling, as if every part of him had fallen asleep and was now waking up all at once. He sat up, pushing the blankets away. The room was very cold. He could see his own breath in the dim light from the window. The humming grew stronger. He felt a peculiar shifting deep within his body. His bones did not break, but they seemed to soften and then reform, making soft popping sounds like knuckles cracking or wood settling in an old house. It was not painful, but it was deeply, profoundly strange. It was the feeling of becoming something else. He stumbled out of bed and stood unsteadily. His perspective was wrong. He seemed taller. The ceiling felt closer. He looked down at his hands and cried out, but the sound that left his mouth was a choked, guttural noise. His fingers were thickening, curling inward. A dark, coarse fur, the color of a storm cloud, was sprouting rapidly across his skin. He watched, a captive audience to his own transformation, as his wedding band slipped from a vanishing finger and fell with a soft ping to the wooden floor. The change accelerated. His body stretched and reconfigured itself with a series of soft clicks and sighs. He fell forward, catching his weight on arms that were now legs, on hands that were now broad, padded paws tipped with dark claws. The world from down here was a different place. The bed was a towering cliff. The smell of the room, once just faint traces of dust and old linen, exploded into a complex story. He could smell the wool of the rug, the polish on the floor, the faint sweetness of the pine tree in the other room. He was on all fours, breathing heavily. Panic, a clean and human terror, rose in him. He tried to say what is happening, but his mouth and throat would not form the words. Instead, a low, uncertain whine rumbled in his chest. He had to see. He had to know what he was. He moved, his new limbs clumsy and uncoordinated, like walking on stilts for the first time. He lurched into the dark living room. The television screen was a black rectangle. In its dark glass, he saw a shape. He saw a large, lean animal with a long muzzle and pointed ears. It had intelligent, amber-colored eyes that held a familiar, weary confusion. It was a creature from a storybook, a giant wolfhound, but wilder. This was him. This was Noah Jones. He stared at his reflection. The expected terror, the monster movie frenzy, did not come. The creature in the glass did not look furious or evil. It looked shocked. It looked lost. It looked, he realized with a strange calm, deeply sad. The human part of his mind, the part that was still Noah, observed this. He was not a raging beast. He was a bewildered man trapped in a strange and enormous body. The loneliness that had started all of this was still there, but it was now wrapped in a layer of pure, staggering wonder. He was no longer just a man in a quiet house. He was something else, something new, standing in the dark on Christmas morning, trying to understand what to do next. The initial shock began to settle, not into calm, but into a kind of focused bewilderment. Noah stood very still in the center of his living room, a great shaggy statue. The human part of his mind was a small, clear voice speaking from inside a vast and unfamiliar instrument. "Breathe," the voice said. "Just breathe." He took a slow breath. It was then that the second wave of change truly announced itself. It was not in his body, which now felt solid and strangely balanced on four strong legs. It was in the world itself. The silent house was silent no more. His ears, tall and swiveling like satellite dishes, caught sounds that turned the familiar space into a hidden universe. He could hear the steady, faint ticking of the kitchen clock from 2 rooms away. He could hear the frantic, papery flutter of a moth's wings trapped inside the glass shade of a lamp. Beneath the floorboards, he detected the nearly silent scratch of a tiny heartbeat and tiny claws. A mouse nesting in the insulation. The Christmas tree was a chorus of minute creaks as its plastic branches settled, and he could even hear the faint, dry rustle of a single pine needle drifting down to the carpet. But it was his nose that truly overwhelmed him. Smell was no longer a background sense. It was a flood of information, a vibrant, layered history of his own life painted in the air. The armchair held the deep, comforting scent of his own body, yes, but also the ghostly traces of his daughter's peach shampoo from her last visit, and fainter still, the citrus cologne his son used. He could smell the bitterness of yesterday's coffee dregs in the kitchen sink and the sweet, decaying ghost of a banana in the trash can. He could separate the scent of the wool rug from the scent of the old book on the shelf and the waxy scent of the candles in the drawer. Every object, every memory, had an odor, driven by a curiosity that was both human and deeply instinctual. He moved. Walking was an odd, rolling gait. His claws clicked softly on the hardwood, a new and foreign sound. He nudged his muzzle against the back door. The cold metal of the handle was a startling sensation against his nose. He pushed, and the flimsy door latch, designed to keep out the wind and nothing more, yielded with a simple click. The world outside was a blast of cold, clean air that carried 10,000 stories. The snow was not just white. It smelled of frozen water, of distant stars, of the deep, sleeping earth beneath. He could pick out the crisp scent of pine sap from his neighbor's tree, the oily smoke from a chimney 3 houses down, the sweet, tangy trail of a rabbit that had passed through the yard hours ago. The suburb, blanketed and hushed for Christmas morning, was a bustling, invisible map of life. He stepped fully into the snow. It was not a cold shock to his feet, but a pleasant crunch. His thick, leathery paw pads were insulated against the ice. He lifted one paw and looked at the perfect, star-shaped print it left behind. A strange, powerful feeling rose in his chest. It was not human joy, but a pure, physical exhilaration. This body, this confusing gift, was made for this. For the quiet, for the cold, for hearing and smelling the secret heart of the world. The vast, hollow loneliness was still present, but its edges were softening, blurred by the sheer volume of life pouring into his new senses. He was not just Noah alone in a house. He was Noah, a part of the silent, sparkling, deeply alive Christmas morning, the urge to stay hidden fought a brief battle with a stronger, older instinct. The need to move, to explore this new self and this new world won. Noah stepped beyond the rectangle of light from his kitchen window and into the full embrace of the pre-dawn Christmas. The snow came up to his ankles, a soft, whispering resistance with each step. The suburb of Hollyridge Lane lay under a thick white quilt. Not a single porch light was on. The only illumination came from the faint, pearly glow of the moon on the snow and the colorful twinkle of Christmas lights, their cheer muted and silent from inside distant homes. He moved down the middle of the empty street, a shadow among shadows. The fear of being seen was still there, a human thread in his mind, but the world felt so deeply asleep. His senses, so overwhelming indoors, began to find a rhythm outside. They were not a cacophony anymore, but a symphony. He could hear the low hum of electricity in a nearby power line. He could hear the soft, dense sound of snow slipping from a laden pine branch a street over. His nose sorted the air into distinct layers. Underneath the clean scent of snow was the loamy smell of frozen gardens, the faint chemical tang of a plastic sled left on a lawn, and the intricate, woven scent trails of other creatures. A neighbor's cat had prowled along this fence hours ago. A family of raccoons had cut across that yard, heading for their den. He walked without a human purpose. He did not need to go to the store or take out the trash. He simply followed his nose and his ears, led by curiosity. He passed the Anderson house, where he could smell the rich, buttery scent of pastry already baking. At the big oak tree on the corner, he paused, lifting his nose. He could detect the distant, cold metal scent of the lake a mile away, and the warm, sleeping scent of cows from the farm beyond the development. His own neighborhood, known for 30 years by its sidewalks and paint colors, was now an entirely different place. It was a landscape of scent and sound, of histories written in the air and on the ground. He was not a man walking his old route. He was a visitor in a foreign, breathtakingly detailed country. The loneliness, that cold stone in his chest, was still present, but it was no longer the only thing he could feel. It was surrounded now by the crisp cold on his tongue, the powerful play of muscle under his fur as he walked, the sheer, stunning aliveness of the sleeping world. For the first time in months, he was not thinking about his empty house or his quiet life. He was simply being, a large, gentle creature experiencing a silent, holy morning. The peace he felt was not a human peace. It was older, and it seeped into him, quieting the last echoes of his panic. He was part of this. He belonged to the frost and the scent trails and the falling snow, as much as he belonged to the armchair and the coffee mug. The pull of the park was a gentle one. It lay at the end of Hollyridge Lane, a small stretch of frosted trees and a pond now frozen solid. It was a place Noah knew well from summer walks and winter sledding with his children long ago. In this new form, under this new snow, it was an unexplored kingdom. He padded through the open gate, his breath making soft plumes in the air that held the cold, clean scent of ice and bark. He was following a fascinating thread of smell, something sharp and wild that he thought might be a fox, when a different sound cut through the morning. It was a tiny, frantic sound, a brittle chirping, like a rusty hinge swinging. It was a sound of distress. His tall ears swiveled, pinpointing the source. The sound came from a dense, snow-laden holly bush near the old bandstand, its red berries like drops of blood against the white. Noah approached slowly, his large body lowering into a cautious crouch. Pushing his muzzle gently through the prickly leaves, he saw a male cardinal, a stunning splash of crimson, was hopelessly entangled in a snarl of discarded Christmas lights. The plastic cords were wound around one wing and its tiny legs. The bird was exhausted, its feathers puffed against the cold, its bright eyes wide with a terror Noah understood completely. It had been struggling for a long time. The human part of Noah felt a surge of pity. The instinctual part of him, the part that was now this large canine creature, felt a deep, resonant urge to act. This was not prey. This was a small life in trouble. He whined softly in his throat, a low, rumbling sound meant to soothe. The bird went still, watching him with one black, shiny eye. Noah knew his teeth were powerful. He had felt their strength when he yawned. The challenge was not strength, but precision. He had to be careful. So very careful. He extended his head, his long muzzle trembling with concentration. He ignored the urge to simply bite and pull. Instead, he used the very tip of his front teeth, the way a person might use fine tweezers. He cut a single green wire between his teeth. He applied the gentlest pressure until the plastic cord stretched and then snapped. The cardinal fluttered, a burst of panic. Noah froze, holding his breath. He waited for the bird to settle, then began again. He worked with a patience he did not know he possessed, snicking one tiny strand after another. He was an accountant unraveling a terrible knot. He was a father untangling a delicate necklace. The world narrowed to this task, to the feel of brittle plastic and the tiny, warm breaths of the trapped bird. Finally, with the last soft tug, the last strand fell away. The cardinal hopped free onto the snowy ground. For a moment, it just stood there, as stunned as Noah had been in his own living room. Then, in a movement of pure grace, it hopped once, twice, and fluttered up to land right on the broad gray bridge of Noah's muzzle. Time stopped. Noah could feel the incredible, weightless scratch of tiny claws on his fur. He could see every perfect feather, the black mask around its eyes, the slight trembling of its body. They looked at each other, man and bird, creature and creature, held in a silent Christmas morning pact. Then, with a whir of wings that sounded like tearing silk, the cardinal pushed off. It became a red arrow shooting into the gray sky, a living ornament returning to its tree. Noah sat back on his haunches, watching it go. A feeling bloomed in his massive chest, warm and golden. It was not a human pride exactly. It was simpler. It was the satisfaction of a right action completed. In this strange and bewildering new shape, he had not brought harm. He had brought help. The loneliness inside him did not vanish, but in that moment, it was filled with a quiet, radiant light. He had connected. He had mattered. On this silent morning, he had given a gift. The encounter with the cardinal left Noah with a profound stillness. He sat in the snow by the holly bush for a long time, watching the sky where the bird had vanished. The warm feeling in his chest slowly settled, merging with the crisp peace of the morning. The initial terror and confusion were gone, replaced by a weary, wondering acceptance. He was this creature for now, and it was not a curse. As the first true hint of dawn began to lighten the sky from black to deep blue, a new sound reached his sensitive ears. It was the distant, melodic call of church bells. They came from the old stone church downtown, ringing for the early Christmas service. "Oh come, all you faithful." The sound was beautiful and clear, each note vibrating through the frozen air and echoing in the hollows of his chest. It was a human sound, a call to community and celebration. For the first time, it did not make him feel like an outsider looking in. It felt like a part of the morning's tapestry, a thread woven with the scent of pine and the memory of a red bird's flight. With the bells, he felt a familiar internal stirring. The deep cellular humming that had started his change began again. This time it was slower, less urgent. It felt like a gentle tide going out. He knew, without understanding how he knew, that it was time to go home. He was not afraid of the change now. He regarded it with a calm curiosity. He rose and trotted back through the park gate, following his own earlier paw prints in the snow. The journey back was different. He was not exploring now. He was returning. He moved with a quiet purpose, his large body a dark shape against the white. He saw a light click on in an upstairs window of the Peterson house. The world was beginning to wake up. He reached his own backyard. He nudged the door open and slipped inside, closing it softly with his muzzle. The warm air of the house felt thick and heavy compared to the sharp outside. He went to the living room and lay down on the rug before the cold, dark fireplace. He curled his body, tucking his paws beneath him. He closed his amber eyes. The change back was a soft unfolding. The humming deepened into a soothing vibration. He felt himself shrinking, the world seeming to grow larger around him again. The thick fur receded like a tide going out across sand. His bones shifted with quiet pops and sighs, settling into their familiar human architecture. It was not painful. It was like stretching after a very long sleep. He opened his eyes. He was Noah Jones again. He was naked, lying on the rug, and the morning light was now bright enough to see the dust motes dancing in the air. He sat up slowly. He felt a deep physical tiredness, the kind that comes after a long journey. But his mind was clear, clearer than it had been in months. He stood and walked to the window. The world outside looked the same. The snow, the trees, the quiet street. But there, leading from his back step and disappearing into the park, was a single set of large, deep paw prints. Proof he was not dreaming. A slow smile touched his lips, a real smile that reached his eyes. He had not been broken by loneliness. He had been transformed by it, and then he had been given back. He understood now. This was not something that happened to him. It was a part of him, a hidden layer of his own being that had awoken. He was still Noah. He was just more Noah than he was before. He picked up his wedding band from the floor where it had fallen. He held it in his palm for a moment, then placed it gently in a small dish on the mantel. It was a memory, not a shackle. He went to make coffee, ready to face the quiet Christmas day, no longer fearing the silence within it. A full year turned like a page on a calendar. Hollyridge Lane was once again dressed in winter white. It was Christmas morning, and the first pale light was just brushing the rooftops. Inside the house on the corner, Noah Jones stood at his kitchen window, waiting for his coffee to brew. The room was warm and held the rich, sweet smell of cinnamon rolls baking in the oven. A modest tree twinkled in the living room, but the house no longer felt like a museum. It felt lived in. A book lay open on the sofa. A pair of slippers waited by the hearth. Noah listened. He did not just hear the drip of the coffee maker. With a quiet, focused part of his mind, he could hear the soft hiss of gas beneath the oven flame. He could hear the nearly silent settling of frost on the windowpane outside. His senses had never fully retreated to their old, dull limits. They remained as a heightened awareness, a deeper way of listening to the world. The lonely void that had once defined him was now simply a quiet space inside, a space that allowed him to perceive more, not less. His children were coming later. Michael was driving in from the city, and Lauren was bringing her new boyfriend to meet him. There would be noise and laughter and wrapping paper everywhere. He was looking forward to the happy chaos. But for now, in this blue hour, he cherished the peace. He finished his coffee and pulled on his thick coat and boots. He stepped out into his backyard. The air was knife-sharp and beautifully clean. He breathed in deeply, and the world unfolded in a map of scent just for him. He could pick out the frostbitten apples still clinging to a neighbor's tree, the wood smoke from a fireplace several streets over, the faint, cold mineral smell of the frozen earth. It was a conversation he could choose to listen to whenever he wished. He walked to the park, his boots crunching in last night's fresh powder. He stopped at the holly bush. It was heavy with new snow and bright berries. He did not expect to see the cardinal, but he liked to remember. That moment of connection had been the first thread pulled to mend his life. He had joined a book club at the library, not because he loved every book, but because he liked the sound of different voices in discussion. He had started volunteering one afternoon a week at the animal shelter, where his preternatural calm seemed to soothe the most frightened dogs. He had even gone on a few hesitant dates. He had built a life that was full by choice, not just by habit. The sun crested the hills, turning the snow to a field of glittering diamonds. Noah turned for home, ready to make breakfast for his family. He was not a man haunted by a secret. He was a man completed by one. He knew the wild, gentle creature was not a separate thing. It was the part of him that understood silence, that felt the turning of the seasons in his blood, that knew kindness was often a quiet act. It was the part that had been sleeping, waiting for the right kind of quiet to wake up. As he reached his back door, he paused and looked up at the vast, clear sky. He was Noah Jones, 56 years old, a father, a friend, a man who sometimes preferred long walks in the snow. And on the very stillest of nights, when the world held its breath and the moon was bright, he was also something more. He was a part of the ancient, whispering wild, and he was finally completely at home. The end.